Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We don't know exactly where you are physically, but the important thing that you are here virtually with us today. So is the event OGB EMEA 2, Oracle Groundbreakers 2. Today is the Lux OUG, Luxembourg chapter of the 2. And thank you for joining us, and I hope you subscribe for all sessions during this tour. There are amazing talks. We got a lot of good people submitting to the event. Speaking a little bit about Lux OUG, we were founded in 2019. We have more than 100 members so far. If you are not member yet, please subscribe to the portal www.luxoug.org, and the membership is totally free. Jeff, now I will stop to share my screen and give to you the stage, okay?
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us today, Jeff. It's a great pleasure for us having you here.
So I have a brand new screen and it's huge, but I'm hoping when I switch to presentation mode.
Yes, I am seeing, yeah, we
Great.
are seeing the screen, but
Okay.
it's short.
Hold on
maybe.
a second. Let me try this again. You're saying it's not
Yeah,
top to
I
bottom.
have the, let me put the.
Let me change my screen resolution.
Because we are seeing some black stripes.
Actually, I think I can tell PowerPoint.
To play on the other screen, maybe it's.
Setup slide. Slide monitor. Yeah, hold on. I should have tested this before, huh?
It's okay.
Where's the resolution? Does it not let me change the resolution? So hopefully we have multiple computers. Oh, I see what you see now. That's weird. My mother told me this would be a problem.
You can maybe you can
I'm going to
put
stop
the
sharing.
presentation on the monitor, smaller monitor.
Yeah, hold on. I think maybe it wouldn't let me change stuff because.
Babu, I unmute you as you.
Okay, now I think we're going to be okay. So let me share again.
Hello.
If you can give a hint, maybe
Hey,
Jeff.
Go down.
Better?
Go down all the way. No.
No, now it's perfect, Jeff. And thank you, Babu.
No, you can make it as default screen, Jeff, like in the extended display. If you go all the way down, when you click the first screen or second screen, there is an option to make it as default display. Just check that, then it will become the default display.
Okay,
yeah.
For next time. Merci beaucoup to everyone.
Oh, okay.
That is the extent of my Luxembourgish or Francais.
Okay,
I
you got,
welcome anyone.
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, if you go there, then I can tell you so that you don't need to
No,
read it.
this is
No, it's
fine.
okay.
We'll just
Okay,
rip through it. We'll do it.
sure.
I'll have it better for next week.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is my contact info. And if anyone ever wants to reach me, the easiest way is probably send me a tweet. But if you don't do Twitter, you can always leave me a comment on my blog. And that's my email address. It's important you don't forget the middle initial, because the other Jeff Smith is on the Exadata team, and he's sick and tired of emails about SQL Developer. So that's how to find me. For me, it's good morning. I'm in North Carolina, which is a few hours south of the nation's capital here. I've been working with database tools for almost 20 years. And I've been at Oracle working on tools like SQL Developer since 2011. And I think my first production database that I destroyed was 733. Larry wrote this nice new mission statement for Oracle. I don't know if you folks have seen this before, but I thought it was very appropriate for this talk. And that is, we want to help you folks see data in new ways and use that data to do the things you want to be successful at. So for businesses, that's make more money. For nonprofits, that's serving your cause or your community. And for individuals, that is just being more productive and being more happy and doing whatever we can to make 2020 less mauvais or mal. I forget how to say bad. So that's what this talk is about, is concentrating on working with data in SQL Developer and giving you a few tips and tricks that you can immediately implement in your day-to-day use of the tool. So I'm going to be showing you a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. And my advice is, don't try to ingest or take all of it all at once. Wait until something catches your attention, maybe once or twice in the session, and maybe write those things down, and you can investigate it later in more detail. And you can also find versions of this talk on my YouTube channel. I have slides if you want those, and anything I showed today, I've done full-blown blog posts as well. But if you need help finding that stuff, just drop me a line and I'll send you links. So a little bit about SQL Developer. I used to think of it as the new tool, but in reality, it's at least 16 years old. And the version I'm showing you today is version 20.2. So the versioning scheme changed in 2017. We switched over to basically a quarterly, or as frequently as a quarterly release schedule. 2020 kind of made us rethink that. We didn't have a 20.1. We're not going to have a 20.3. So we're going to have updates for ORDS and SQL CL, but we're not going to have a 20.3 for SQL Developer. There definitely will be a 20.4, but I might also have a patch put out for 20.2 to get some bug fixes out to customers sooner than the end of the year. Most of what I'm showing you today is going to be available in any version of SQL Dev that starts at least with an 18 or a 19 in the version number. I think this was 2 or 3 years ago, we tracked based on the feedback that people agree to share with us when they start the tool up. Over 1 billion SQL worksheets had been opened around the world for the year. And I'm just trying to imagine how many select star from queries that equated to. Probably too many. Anyway, there's a lot of you folks out there using the tool, and we appreciate that. We appreciate your support, and I appreciate you coming to this session. So the most basic thing to know about SQL Developer is that it is a Java application. So I'm demonstrating it to you today on my Windows corporate machine, but I could easily switch over to my Mac or into a Linux VM, and it would generally work and look and feel the same across those 3 environments. And it'll really work on any operating system that supports a display or a GUI, but it also needs Oracle Java. And for Oracle Java, we need the JDK, so that's not the JRE, and we support versions 8 and 11. Now you can use things higher than 11. So the Java team radically changed the whole Java release cycle. And you don't have to be a Java developer to use SQL Developer. But if you're wanting to use newer Java installs to improve the performance and response time of SQL Developer, then I would recommend you use version 11. And if you wanted to go crazy, then yeah, you could look at version 14. I'm running it locally and it seems to be going well for me, but 8 and 11 are what we officially support. So licensing, forever, Java wasn't really licensed commercially or not anything that you would have to worry about. And as a Oracle product consumer, it's still not an issue for you folks. So since Oracle SQL Developer as an Oracle product requires Java, then you are more than welcome to use the Oracle JDK without worrying about licensing it. Now, if you're on Oracle Java 8, that doesn't come into play at all. But I have customers concerned about using JDK 11 and higher because of the licensing component, and that is not an issue for using it for Oracle products. And if you have questions about that, I have a blog post that goes into detail, and I have links that go back to the Java product folks' blogs where they talk about this, and they have links to the legal stuff. All right, into the actual tips and tricks. So yeah, I already talked about version 20.2. I would say maybe don't grab every single version as it comes out immediately, but maybe once or twice a year when you have 5 or 10 minutes, go pull down the archive, unzip it to a new location, run it, say yes to importing your old settings, and use it for a few weeks. And if, in fact, you're happy with that, at that point, it would be safe to go delete your old copies of SQL Developer. If you're running any version, it starts with a 1, a 2, a 3, or 4, or even a 17, I would say you definitely should think about upgrading. So, so many people, I find if I'm watching them use the tool, they're not as efficient as they could be. And so what I like to do is help you save keystrokes, save mouse clicks, or even if you're in the command line, you know, how can we save keystrokes? So the more we can do in that space, the more I can help you be more productive. And maybe your wrist has done this way too many times and you don't even have to think about it. Like if for somehow we could disconnect our nervous system from our brain, your hand could probably still execute this series of steps where you go from a query to exporting that to the format that you want by right-clicking in the grids. And I've counted the clicks, and it's at least 7, but it might have been 6 or 8. Anyway, it's a lot of clicks. And I'm not saying stop doing this all the time. I'm just saying quite frequently as a developer, I need to get some test data that I can just throw into a worksheet or a store procedure or a flat file somewhere, and copy and paste is something that's very quick as well. So what I like to do is, instead of in that grid right-clicking and say export, I'll tell SQL Dev when I'm running the query to begin with the format that I want the output to be in. And there's quite a few of those formats that you can take advantage of. And there's a couple of different ways we can make this happen. So what you will see on the screen, it kind of looks like a hint, although it's really just a comment. And this only works inside of the SQL Developer family of products. So if you do this in SQL Plus, it won't work. But if you do it in SQL CL, it will. It'll also work in SQL Developer Web. So what I've done is I've said, hey, run select star from employees, but bring the results back in the form of an insert statement. And if I run that with Control Enter or F9 or that first play button, it's still going to go to the data grid. So for this to work, I have to execute it as a script, which is where we kind of emulate that SQL Plus style of doing things. So let me just quick demo this. new CSV, right? I guess actually the new XML if we want to be technical. User tables. So if I run it this way, it doesn't do anything. I mean, it does its thing, but I don't see it in the JSON. But if I use this button, it comes back in the format that I asked for it. So when I do this, it's obviously just for this query. Now you might be in debug mode for the next 2 or 3 hours, and you don't want to muck up your source code, right? So I can also say set SQL format, and I can say CSV. I could say delimited. So I know over there in Europe, your CSVs are actually semicolons, right? So you could use the delimited option and tell us you want the delimiter to be something other than a comma. I could do something really funky if I wanted to. And then the next thing you can do is specify the enclosures. So in this case, I'm saying use single quotes instead of double quotes. So single quote and delimiter. Or I can say JSON formatted. And you also see I've got a clear screen command in here, which is SQL plus command that we support. And so when we see this, we automatically clear the screen and then give you your data. And so JSON formatted is a little bit easier for a human being to read versus a person. Now, when I go to look at the export options in this grid, these are the exact settings that you'll need to use. So these strings here need to go here. And they're also case sensitive because Java is case sensitive, so that's kind of fun. The only ones you can't use in this way are sort of the binary formats. So like you can't do PDF and you can't do Excel, but most of all the other ones are available. Like I said, there are quite a few. Now, even knowing this trick, I do find myself using this feature a lot. And like I said, I counted like 7 or 8 clicks to be able to get what I wanted. And so there is a way to optimize this and optimize it quite a bit. If we look in the preferences, and I do apologize, we're going to be spending a lot of time in this talk about the preferences. But this is something I recommend everyone do. Like even right now, if you want to follow along, is open the database page of the preferences and come down to where it says export and click on the main page. And think of what are you doing exports and what format are you using the most? And select that here. So if 9 times out of 10 you're doing CSV, change this to CSV. And if 9 times out of 10 you're sending it to the clipboard, set that. And of course you always want UTF-8, then set that as well. So setting it here, anytime I go to do an export of any grid anywhere in a worksheet, in a table editor, in the session browser, that's what it's going to default to. And then for that 10th time out of 10, where you wanted to do a little bit different, then you can come up here and futz around with the controls and get what you want. So just another thing while we're there, there's also a page here for each of the formats. So for delimiter, you could set this to semicolon. And so that's one fewer click even more when you're going to do these. Oh, and yes, so that script engine, just like you have the spool command in SQL+, we support that. So I could come in here. There's actually a couple things we do above SQL+, which is interesting. So let's say SQL format is insert. And let's say I'm going to do, I want to do everything in a specific directory. So I'm going to say I'm in Windows, so don't laugh at me. Users, desktop, spool, locations.csv. But I also want to do DDL locations. So this set of commands, oh, first of all, I should probably update this too. So I'm going to set my format to insert. I'm going to tell SQL Dev when it's reading and writing files, that's the directory I want it to go to. I'm going to clear the screen, and then I'm going to generate the DDL for the locations table. Oh. We'll say .SQL. And then get the data, and then we'll say off. Now, the first time you run the DDL command, it can take a few seconds. The dbms metadata package is quite powerful, but also somewhat resource intensive for the first run in your session. And then after that, it's pretty darn quick. And if I were to go look at my desktop, I would have this file now that had everything I needed to go work with this object somewhere else, including all of the data for it in the form of inserts. So I can type this faster than I can manipulate the tools, database export dialog, and then pick the table that I want. And obviously I could add where clauses here and not use select star from and all kinds of goodies. So I think I've shown you enough tricks already that you could just stop right now and be better off. But I hope you'll stick with me for another 20 minutes and we'll get some more tips. So here's an example of using the HTML format and spooling that to a file. And so we give you a decent looking grid and even some JavaScript there to help you find the data in that spooled out exported query set. And we just talked about this. I'm gonna skip this one. This trick for me is a game changer. So when you're browsing tables, I'll often see people opening 2 or 3 or even more copies of SQL Developer or other tools just so that they can see more than one table at a time. And I'm here to tell you, you don't need to do that. And even if you want to see a single table in multiple ways, we make that very easy. So let me show you how to do that. So I have my employees table here. And if I wanted to see 2 sets of employees based on their hire date or based on their salary, I could say salary is greater than some big number, which that's not that big. Now, if I take this little widget, I call it a widget. I don't know what the actual term for it is. But if I pull that down, it basically clones the display below. And so I can now say salary is less than 1,000. There's way too many. Maybe this is a daily salary. How much are these people making? These clerks, that's sad. Wow. Okay. Well, it looks like they haven't got a raise since they were hired. That's bad. Okay, so this is a way to see a single table, different sets of the data in a single display. Now, as you're opening database objects in the the upper left-hand corner, you're gonna see this little pen icon. And what that tells SQL Dev is that, hey, when Jeff goes to open his next table, he doesn't wanna keep this table open. But if I pin it, I'm saying, hey, this is pinned to my desktop, don't make it go away. So now when I click on departments, I have both. And by the way, you can drag and drop these around so they're at where you want them to be. And for the moment now, I'm stuck seeing one table at a time, which might still push you to go, well, I'm just going to open up another copy of SQL Dev so I can see departments and employees at the same time. And you don't need to do that. And there's a couple of ways you can get both of these tables displayable at the same time. And both are going to involve using your mouse. So I do apologize, folks. You're going to have to use the mouse every now and then. You can either click and drag. And you see that orange bar, that's painting where it's going to drop to. And I'm looking to, yeah, I can hear this will do it. So now I have employees up here and departments down here. So I could do that. I could bring it back up here. I could also say right click, new document tab group, which basically does the same thing, but I have a doc set of tabs here and a set of tabs here. So now I can have a side-by-side view. And this is for any database object or actually any screen in the tool. So I could have my SQL worksheet and my table and my other table. Now I just bought a 42-inch widescreen monitor. So I could, with my nearly 4K resolution, I could have probably 10 sets of document tabs on one display. That's nuts. But you know, as far as your eyes and your attention span allows, you can have fun with this feature. At the end of the day, if you wanted to go back to something a little less crazy, you can just right click in these desktop tab groups and you can say collapse. And we're kind of back. Now I still have my two tables. If you've been doing something quite intense or something weird happens to your machine and your desktop display gets messed up and you're not able to fix it, just come to the window menu and say reset Windows to factory settings. And I don't know how this translates in your UI, but all it's saying is reset your desktop. And it'll put the connections on the left, your worksheet on the right, and your log panels on the bottom. That's all it does. But it's gotten me out of trouble a few times. So that's the split grids and the desktop, multiple desktop panel views. And if you know those two tricks, you're going to be more advanced than 85% of the SQL developer users out there. Because even though I've been doing this tips and tricks talk for almost a decade, and I've probably talked to thousands of users, we have 7 million people out there using SQL Dev. So I need to find a way to reach everyone's brain all at once. Here's a fun trick, and I don't expect you to write down this text or even take a screenshot, but if you're interested in this concept, if you go on my blog and search for SQL Dev link, you'll find this one. So instead of using the connection panel to navigate your schemas, you can create like a SQL style report and use that as an object navigator. So these list of objects down here, if I click on them, will actually open those objects just like we were browsing before from the tree. And you can do this with any type of object in the database. And I've got examples and links to the SDK docs that talk about the syntax required to have a go at this. But I've seen some people build some interesting actual reports in SQL Dev using this trick. And actually, I would consider these actually tricks. They're not tips. And I differentiate a trick and a tip in the sense that the tricks aren't documented. And the tips are documented, but you'd have to read all of the docs to know the tips. And most people don't have time to sit down and read a technical manual. They usually Google when they want to figure something out. And when they do that, they don't end up in the docs anyway. They end up on Tim Hall's Oracle-based site. So maybe they're all technically tricks, but this is another style of report you can build into the grids. So you can actually put HTML down in these grids if you want. Now, there's not a lot of display space for the HTML, and it's only going to support like HTML3, so like really basic HTML. But you could use a decode or a case to basically replace these strings and wrap them with HTML tags to make certain patterns in your data easier to find. In this case, I've taken the salary and I've added a visualization to it. So as I'm browsing through salaries, it's easy for me to find the ones that I think fall in and out of the norms that I'm looking or expecting. So I've got tips and tricks and posts with the source code for this as well. A lot of people don't know about this one, and I'm not sure I knew about it until someone showed it to me, which is how I've learned everything. I don't just know this stuff because I'm the product manager. But when you're editing a table, you can actually hit the add button X number of times and then paste delimited data directly into the grid to do. I would call this a dirty insert. Hopefully when we're working in production, our inserts are actual insert statements and they're codified and they're scrubbed and they're proper. But when you're doing quick and dirty stuff for dev and test, this is a nice trick. The only trick is if you're going to paste in 8 rows, you need the 8 rows in the grid already. It's not smart enough to add the extra rows for you. This shouldn't be a trick, but it is, so it just is what it is. When you want to copy something out of a grid and you want to also get the column headers, you need to throw in either a command or a control. Or no, you need to add a control onto your copy request. So on Windows, it's Control plus Shift plus C. And when I do that and paste, it's going to include the column headers. Now, what you might also not be aware of is if you right-click on a column header, you can copy just the column headers. In fact, I can copy just specific column headers. So I've got 3 cells in this row selected. And if I right-click copy selected column headers, it gave me just those column headers. But if I want these rows plus the column headers, it's Control Shift C and then Control V, and I get my column headers. Sabina in the community is quite fond of this trick, and she's always giving me enhancement requests to make it even better. So you can thank Sabina if you like this one. If you drag and drop things out of a grid into your worksheet or code editor, if it's a number, we will separate those with commas for you. And if it's text, we'll quote the strings for you. For dates, you have to manage those yourselves. And for row IDs, we don't quote those. She's trying to get me to support row IDs, but I don't necessarily want to encourage people to treat row IDs as primary keys, but it's the real world, and I know you folks need to do that. So maybe we'll do that. Okay, so here are some cool things I think everyone should know. The helpers aren't helpers if you don't know how they work and if you don't have your preferences configured in such a way that they make you more productive. If anything, they're the opposite of helpers. And when I say insight, I'm specifically talking about this feature where as you're typing, SQL Dev will put up in your face a list of suggestions. And these suggestions are going to be about as good as your code is. So I asked for the help. Generally, SQL Dev would never offer this type of list to me. It's set up out of the box to only give you this list of suggestions if there's 10 or fewer. If I'd said EM and then ask for the help. This is a little bit better help, you know, so I've basically said I'm looking for something that starts with EM. So it's showing me things in my schema, and then it's going outside my schema to look for other things in the database. And then after that, it's going to look in the Oracle documentation for sample SQL statements that include that text, believe it or not. So to configure this behavior, we again go back into the preferences, and we look at completion insight. So I've in fact disabled where SQL Developer automatically gives me the advice. So by that I mean, if that's enabled, if I stop typing for about half a second and there's less than 10 suggestions, those pop-ups just appear. So I've turned them off, and what that means is they only come up when I hit Control Spacebar, which is the keyboard shortcut for asking for the advice. If you're okay with the automatic advice, then I do suggest you tweak this to be something comfortable with for you. So, you know, if you're me, I need more time to think about what I want. And if you're Sabina, she's probably down here, 0.2. But, you know, something reasonable. And then also this as well. So you might be okay with tons of advice and scrolling all day long to see everything. So you might bump this up to maybe 20. I wouldn't set it to 100. That's just silly. I think you need an actual filtered list of hits. That's how that works. Now, as you're writing your very beautiful select star, there's not generally something wrong with select star from queries, but there are generally some practical things wrong with them, especially if they're in your source code. If they're in your source code and you're expecting specific columns in a specific order and by a specific name, there's no rule in the database that says those things can't change. And if your code isn't defensively built to handle that, it's going to break. So, I mean, you can be lazy and type this, but then use the trick. So there's the parser's trying to give us some advice here. So if I put my mouse over it, here's the advice. It's saying, hey, this is what that star really means. So I can use this to peek. So if I'm in a stored procedure and I have a cursor and I want to know what columns are going to be in that cursor, then I can use this without actually going through the data dictionary to find that. If I actually want to replace this text, then I can just click the text and maybe format it when I'm done. Now I can undo this and get back to what I want if I want. There's another insight trick where we can pull up SQL and PL/SQL keywords and help you find the documentation for that. So the book piece in the insight, if you click the book, that takes you to the docs. And this text is sample queries included in the docs that demonstrate the use of the case command. And if I click the text, I'll get that example query. If I click the book, I'll get the doc link. So I use this. Sometimes it's faster for me than actually going to Google and saying, hey, Google, bring me the SQL case stuff. Oh, thanks, Siri. Yeah, it'll say, and I also don't have to append the version number. It's smart enough to see the version of the database you're on and pull up that specific version of the docs. Here's another insight feature. We'll try to build foreign keys. Not foreign keys. We'll try to build the joins for you. So we'll see these IDs, these columns are common between the tables, and we'll suggest the joins for you. So there's 3 possible joins there. Now, we'll build it for you using the classic Oracle join syntax, which most of us were raised on, but I think most of us would also agree that the majority of the industry is standardized on ANSI style joins. I really don't care which one you want to use, but in SQL Developer, you can tell us what you want to use and we'll rewrite your query for you. So this is a relatively new feature. I think it's 19.4 or 20.2. And you can right click on your query, say refactoring and toggle ANSI Oracle, and we go in both directions. I've tested 15 different variations and it seemed to be pretty good. It'll at least get you close and you can finish it off from there. The trivia behind this in the database is the optimizer itself will rewrite this to look like this most of the time anyway. But one of the important things I think for writing SQL is that you write readable SQL. And I think this is easier to read. It's just also harder for me to type because I was trained on this side. But my co-developers and coworkers don't have to know that because they always see this because I let the tool do it for me. Of course, I test it to make sure it still brings back the data I think it's going to. As you're typing, if you see the little squiggles under your object names and you mouse over it and you see undefined, that's saying, hey, we looked in the database, there is nothing called employees. So that's not going to work. So it's inside advice. It's not always 100% accurate, but we're saying you might want to check this before you even run it. It might save you the embarrassment. I talked about joins for a second. Yeah, these things that generally imply foreign key constraints as well. Now, we have a data modeling feature inside of SQL Developer and a full-blown data modeling product where you can connect to an existing database and reverse engineer it. Or even if you're pulling up an individual table, instead of browsing the data, there's a model page there. And if I click on that, it'll bring up what we call the neighbors. So we'll walk the dependency trees via foreign key constraints in both directions. We'll look for childs and parents, basically, but not grandchildren and not grandchildren. Grandparents or grandchildren, basically. Now, I talk to a lot of customers that get excited about this feature and they go and try and use it, and all of their pictures don't have any lines on them because a developer at some point decided not to use the database for controlling referential integrity. So I do apologize if your diagrams look like this. But there is a nice trick. In the data modeler, you can say discover foreign keys. And if you have a primary key column and that column name is found in other tables, we will infer or guess basically that there's a relationship there. And it is a guess. So this is better than nothing. And if you want to be the very, very nice person in your org, you could take the time to come in and manually document the schemas for your fellow coworkers, and I'm sure they would love you forever, or at least buy you a coffee or a beverage of your choice. Let's skip this one. Skip this one. Skip this one. I think I got a minute left. I like this one. Okay. And I apologize for not doing live demo, but when I go to do live demo, I talk way too much and I steal time from my tips. So in order to get you as many tips as possible, I'm sticking to some slides. When you're tuning queries, oftentimes we'll hit the explain plan button, which is okay. Even better than the explain plan button is using DBMS Xplan, because that's going to be the actual plan the database uses versus the plan that it guesses, which is what an explain does. The explain plan button in SQL Dev is a very complex button and it has a lot of stuff hidden in it. If you hit just the button, you get an explain plan. But if you click the drop down next to it, you get a lot more. So our parser, as you're writing SQL, figures out what the SQL ID is, and then goes and looks in the data dictionary for that plan. And your query can have more than one plan. So this is telling me there are actually two versions of this, not two versions. There are two plans for this query, for this SQL ID. And you can pull up either of these. So if I click on this, you'll see it where you'd normally see an explain plan, and it'll have the SQL ID and child number at the top, so you know exactly what you're looking at. the more recent addition to this feature is just this word, DBMSX plan. And so this is just a little, almost like a keyboard shortcut. We just generate this text for you. Select star from table, DBMSX plan, display cursor, SQL ID. So we save you all of this typing. And then at some point, you might want to come in and change the format. So again, I'm trying to save you time. And if you're dealing with queries, at some point, you're going to accidentally write one that doesn't run as fast as you want it to. And this is a nice tip. Someone told me, hey, I hate the all stats last format. Okay, we'll create a code snippet and you can pull that up, you know, to do instead if you want. Now, when you are looking at plans down here at the bottom, using the actual plan dialog, if you right click, you can have two plans side by side and we'll highlight the differences. This shouldn't be a tip or a trick. It's in the UI. We don't hide it, but most people don't know about it. So look for that. Brand new in 20.2, we added a search feature. These plans can be huge. So if you're looking for full table scans or Cartesian joins, or you're looking for an index name, or really anything, any part of the plan, even in the XML portion of the plan, this search will find it. And then finally, I want to end on this. So if you have a trace file, instead of using tkprof, if you want a visual way to see what's in your trace file, if you have that file on your machine, so if you have a local dev instance running in a Docker or VM or Oracle running on your machine natively, these are going to be a lot easier to get your hands on. But if someone even sends you a trace file, you just say file open and point to the trace file and you'll get this nice visual indicator. Okay, so I've used up all of my time and borrowed 2 minutes. I apologize for that. I don't have a hard stop physically. I'm happy to stay on and take questions if anyone has questions. But this is
Yes.
where you can find my slides. It's on SlideShare, and my blog is where you can find all of these tips in long format.
Thank you so much, Jeff. There is one question on the question and answers box. Do you have any code formatting option on the device? For many years where I am told user and I am not be able to get told like formatting, which is for me much more user-friendly than the full the SQL Developer formatting setup.
Don't use the default formatting setup if you don't like it. There's 20 options, give or take. You can do a lot of things to switch them up. But the best advice I have is tell me what you want the code to look like and tell me how close you can get. And I can reply back with the options you need to change. And if I can't make it happen, I can file an enhancement request to get an option added.
Nice.
Can
And
I share?
you can share your screen again.
Yeah,
Don't
the
worry.
default settings for maximum rows returned. So maximum rows returned, there's only an option for that if you're executing as a script. Where is that? It's my window. Okay. So in here,
We are not
there's an
seeing your
option.
screen.
Oh, okay.
Share your screen again, please.
That's good, because then you can't see me hunting and pecking and looking like an idiot. If you pull up, yeah, this one. Max rows to print in the script. Now, if you want to prevent the max number of rows someone can pull back in a grid, I don't have an option for you, except to use the resource consumer group to limit to them the number of resources they can steal from the database because they don't know what they're doing.
And there is another one question. I think that one, yeah.
Hints for performance. I'm going to guess they mean performance of the application and not performance for the SQL. So SQL Developer is kind of like Chrome. People complain about how much memory Chrome uses. And then if I look at their browser, they have 57 tabs open. So when you're done doing something, close it. And maybe the best DBAs, if you're wondering what your developers are doing, they're doing stuff like this, but worse. Like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's what I want. And they come over here and they completely forget about what they've done here. Well, that cursor is still open. That process is still sitting on the box waiting for you to finish this. So when you close this, you're doing two things. You're releasing server resources, but you're also releasing client resources. So close these things when you're done. The other thing I would suggest is open the features dialog. And some of these are quite powerful, but they're also quite large. I would say fat, but that's not nice. Data miner is super awesome, but if you're not using it, it's a ton of resources. So I would turn that off. The migrations feature is super awesome, but most people aren't doing migrations every day, so you could turn that off. And then the other ones to consider maybe, actually those are the two biggies, data miner and migrations. If you turn those off, it'll decrease the resources a good bit. The other thing you can do is just upgrade your Java. I noticed that, I mean, I didn't measure it, but my brain felt like, oh, this is better when I moved up to Java 11.
Yeah, I think that answered the question. Yeah, the guy said,
Cool.
Thank you.
If he thinks I'm full of it, he can contact me directly and we can go through. There's more things you can do, but you know, in a generic sense, you know, turn things off.
I have
Close things when you're done with it. Yeah.
I have a small question for you. That dirty insert locks the table or not? Because I have trouble in the past with other feature, other tool. Yes, this one.
I mean, it's just doing the same thing you would do. Nothing's happened at this point.
Yeah, but if somebody else have played with SQL Developer to update the values, is not SQL Developer. To
what's
update the
PL/SQL? That sounds
yeah, it's
bad.
another tool. Yeah, it's another tool. You lock the table.
I don't like that. Why would you use a different tool?
No, I use it in the past.
Oh, in the past.
Yeah, back old days.
You know, I'm kidding, right?
Yeah,
It's all good.
Okay, there is another question coming. How to interrupt query appears hanging in SQL Developer.
First of all, don't run slow queries and you don't have to kill it, right? That's what Tom Kite would say. And so you can just hit the X button and that asks the JDBC driver to ask the database to give up. And so the keyword here is the user requested cancel of current operation. And then it's up to the database to say, okay, it's canceled. To do that cancel, and then give control back to the UI. So that's basically what you do. Sometimes it takes the database longer than you think it should, and sometimes the database isn't even listening at that point for cancel requests. That's somewhat of a fault of the JDBC implementation in the database. So if you go on my blog, I have a post called something like Murder, Death, Kill, or Die Already, or something like that. But what I advise you can try is, if you have an Oracle client on your machine, if you tell SQL Dev to use this client for your connections, the cancel requests will go across the wire just like they would in SQL Plus or any other tool. And some people have told me it's more reliable than the default JDBC cancel. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for answering all the questions. Now we are running out of time, and it's time to say goodbye for all of you. And thank you for anyone who joined us today. Thank you, Jeff, one more time, and thank you for the attendees.
Thanks for staying so late in the day. I know Connor and all the other all-stars already presented, so thanks for giving me an hour.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Jeff.
Everyone take care.
Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.